The moment Karen stormed down the dock in her faux leather sandals and wide-brimmed straw hat shouting about murderous men with blood-stained hands, every head turned. The fishermen, gritty, sunburned, and halfway through unloading their morning catch, froze mid-migment. I was one of them. My name's Tyler Briggs, 41 years old, born and raised in Chesapeake Bay, Maryland. I've been fishing these waters since I could walk. That morning, I was gutting a striped bass, my hands slick and my focus sharp, until Karen pointed straight at me like I was some war criminal. "You should be ashamed," she shrieked, stepping dangerously close to the edge of the dock. "Every life matters. Fish have feelings too." Her voice cracked like it had rehearsed this speech 1,000 times in a mirror. Before I could respond, she lunged forward, trying to slap the fish out of my hand, but the dock was slick, and she didn't see the coiled netting by her feet. Her ankle twisted and time slowed. She slipped sideways and hit the water with a dramatic splash. The gulls cried out. The dock fell silent. Then someone whispered, "Well, that's a rude awakening." 4 hours earlier, the sun had barely risen, and the docks were peaceful. I'd already iced my first few catches and was sipping coffee from a dented thermos when I heard the buzz. Karen was coming back. It wasn't the first time. A few months ago, she showed up with a megaphone, screaming at crabbers. Another time, she blocked the boat ramp with protest signs taped to cardboard boxes. She called herself an ocean avenger. Online, ran a TikTok with thousands of followers and proudly told people she hadn't eaten anything with a face in 7 years. But what she had in passion, she lacked in context. This wasn't some factory ship slicing fins off sharks. This was a quiet dock in a town that barely had cell phone reception. These men, me included, fished to survive. And when I say survive, I mean keep the heat on, keep the fridge full, and pay off boats that cost more than most people's homes. Karen never asked about that. I first met her 3 months ago when she handed me a flyer that read, "Fishing is violence, go vegan." I had a trout in one hand and a fillet knife in the other. She didn't blink. "That fish could have been someone's mother," she said. I stared at her, unsure whether to laugh or walk away. That's when she pulled out her phone and started recording, angling the shot so it looked like I was scowling at her. "This is Tyler," she told her followers. "He thinks fish don't feel pain. Let's educate him." That clip got over 200,000 views. My daughter showed me later. She was embarrassed. I was angry, but more confused. How do you argue with someone who refuses to see your humanity? Someone who uses you as a villain in a story they've already written. Still, I let it go. Until this morning, after she hit the water, a few guys rushed to help her out, but she flailed and slapped at them like they were trying to drown her. "Don't touch me with your death hands," she screamed. I stepped back and let Jimmy, the youngest on the dock, throw her a life ring. She finally grabbed it. Drenched, humiliated, and shivering in soaked cotton, she climbed up the ladder, mascara running like war paint. "You'll all pay for this," she shouted. "I'll make sure the whole world sees what kind of monsters you are." But even she knew it didn't look good. She was the one who charged at us. She was the one who fell, and we had the whole thing on camera. Dock security footage, plus half the guys had GoPros on. She didn't square up with villains. She tried to shame men doing honest work. And instead, she got baptized in the very water she thought she was defending. Later, as the sun rose higher and the buzz of the incident spread beyond the docks, something shifted. Townspeople started showing up. First a few curious teens, then parents with kids, then a news van, all asking, "Is it true what happened with the vegan lady?" Karen was long gone by then, probably nursing a bruised ego and drafting a dramatic tweet. But something had changed in us, too. It wasn't just a funny story anymore. It was a spark. We realized that maybe, just maybe, it was time we told our side of the story. We weren't villains. We were survivors. And sometimes, even survivors get pushed too far. By that afternoon, the clip had gone viral. One of the local boys posted the dock footage on YouTube, titled it, "Vegan Karen Falls In After Attacking Fishermen." And within hours, it had over 600,000 views. The comments were brutal. Some people laughed, some called it karma, and others argued we shouldn't mock someone for standing up for what they believe in. I didn't comment. I just watched, quietly, thoughtfully. But deep down, I knew this wasn't over. People like Karen don't take humiliation lying down, not when their whole platform is built on being the voice for the voiceless. Especially not when they have an online audience ready to echo their outrage. Sure enough, by evening, she posted a shaky phone video in her car, tears glistening on her cheeks. Today, I was physically attacked by violent fishermen while peacefully protesting the murder of marine life, she sobbed. They laughed, they watched me fall, and no one helped me. I couldn't believe it. She flipped the whole narrative, left out the part where she lunged at me or that we pulled her out. It wasn't just dishonest, it was dangerous. For the town, it'd take kindly to lies. See, this place runs on honesty and sweat. You lie, people remember. You twist the truth, it twists right back. Still wasn't long before Karen filed a formal complaint with the county, said the docks were unsafe, accused us of threatening behavior, claimed our nets and boats were aggressively intimidating. It would have been funny if it wasn't so serious. Jimmy got a call from Child Protective Services because Karen said she saw a minor working around knives and gutting tools. Jimmy's 17. His dad died last year. He works weekends to support his mom and pay for community college. I watched his hands shake as he read the email. That's when I realized Karen wasn't just annoying, she was dangerous. Her mission to save the world was bulldozing real lives. That night, we had an emergency meeting at the dockmaster's office. Half the crew came straight from the water, still wearing boots soaked in brine. Everyone looked tired, frustrated. We passed around copies of her post, the county letter, and a notice about a possible inspection. She's trying to shut us down, someone said. Or go viral again, another muttered. I stood up. If we stay quiet, she controls the story, I said. It's time we told the truth. It wasn't a speech, just a statement. But something in it lit a fire. A few guys nodded, others leaned in. We didn't want revenge. We wanted clarity. Dignity. We needed to show the world what it meant to feed families with bare hands and borrowed gear. So the next morning, we did something we'd never done before. We let the cameras in. Not hers. Ours. Jimmy's cousin, Marla, studied journalism in Baltimore. She brought a crew and filmed us as we worked. Cutting, hauling, mending nets, sharing stories. We spoke plainly. We didn't sugarcoat the smell, the danger, or the desperation. This is what feeding America looks like, I said into the camera. It's not glamorous, but it's real. Marla stitched together a short doc and uploaded it to Facebook and YouTube. It was called The Fisherman Karen Forgot to Ask. Within a day, it passed 1 million views. It didn't feel like victory, but it felt like justice, or at least the beginning of it. And then came the twist none of us saw coming. A former vegan influencer, big time, with a blue check and everything, commented on Marla's post. Activism is about truth, she wrote. What Karen did isn't. I'm sorry, Tyler. I used to be like her. But we can't help animals by hurting people. Her words hit harder than a slap because they didn't just defend us. They opened a conversation, a real one. Comments flooded in from folks who never knew how hard dock life was. Parents, teachers, even small-town mayors. People started questioning Karen's methods. And for the first time since she showed up screaming on her dock, the world wasn't on her side. But Karen wasn't done, not even close. 2 days later, she posted a new video. She wasn't crying this time. She was standing on a pier somewhere else, hair slicked back, tone icy. They want to paint me as a villain, she said. But I won't stop. These fishermen have secrets, and I'm going to expose them. That was the moment the story turned dark. Because we did have secrets. Not criminal ones, but ones we hoped would stay quiet. And Karen had just declared war. The video hit like a lightning strike. Karen didn't just go viral, she went feral. In her new post, she didn't just target the fishermen, she named names, mine included. Tyler Briggs, she said, her voice cold and clipped, has been fishing illegally in restricted zones. Multiple sources have confirmed he ignores marine conservation limits. Lies. Dangerous career-ending lies. My stomach twisted as I watched. Her eyes burned through the screen like a preacher on a crusade. And there's more, she added, holding up blurry drone footage of our boats, edited with ominous music. The docks are hiding something, overfishing, illegal catches, maybe even waste dumping. The government needs to step in. I paused the video. My wife, Hannah, stood behind me, holding our daughter Lily's lunchbox. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. That look, half worry, half heartbreak, was enough. I called Jimmy. His voice shook. My mom saw it, he whispered. She thinks I'm going to get arrested. My throat tightened. Jimmy was just a kid trying to keep his family above water. And now he was being painted as an environmental villain. I tried to calm him, but the truth was, I was scared too. Scared that the inspectors would come with clipboards and fines, that the whispers in town would start, that everything we built would collapse under the weight of one woman's lies and one camera's lens. Karen had crossed a line. This wasn't activism, it was warfare. The next morning, the sheriff showed up at the docks, not with sirens or handcuffs, just quiet questions and a clipboard. He walked the pier slowly, jotting notes, peeking into coolers, asking about licenses. Just doing my job, he said, but we could all feel it. The eyes on us, the pressure building. Karen's storm had made landfall, and it was washing away our peace inch by inch. After he left, I sat on an overturned bucket and stared out at the gray water. My mind spun. I thought of my dad, who taught me to fish, who died at sea when I was 16. I thought of how hard I worked to take over his boat, of the loans, the blisters, the years I went without heat, just to make sure Lily had shoes that fit. Was all of that about to be erased by someone who couldn't tell a crab pot from a tire swing? But even as fear gnawed at us, something else started to rise. Solidarity. The town rallied. Teachers shared our video in classrooms. The pastor spoke about dignity in Sunday's sermon. "Don't let the loudest voice drown out the truth," he said, looking directly at me. I felt something shift. Like maybe we weren't alone in this. Maybe people saw through the performance, but Karen wasn't done performing. The next video she dropped was darker. She claimed she had proof of hidden environmental crimes. She hinted at whistleblowers, edited dock footage to make routine tasks look sinister, and worst of all, she posted a slow-motion clip of Jimmy tossing a fish back into the water. "This," she said, "is the face of cruelty disguised as tradition." That was the last straw. Jimmy's mom broke down at work. He stopped showing up at the dock. The kid who once whistled while he fixed nets now stayed locked in his room. That night, I drove to their trailer and knocked. No answer. I sat on the porch for over an hour. Finally, Jimmy came out. He didn't look angry, just lost. "Maybe she's right," he said quietly. "Maybe I'm just part of something ugly." My heart cracked. "You feed people, Jimmy," I said. "You bring life, not death. Don't let someone who doesn't even know your story steal your truth." But Karen didn't care about truth. She cared about clout. And now she had it. News outlets began calling. One even ran a headline: "Local fishing town under fire. Sustainable or sinister?" My name was mentioned again. Our dock was labeled questionable. Sponsors started pulling out. Orders were canceled. And just like that, our survival became a countdown. She hadn't just smeared our names. She'd cut off our lifeline. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with Hannah and told her everything. About the fines we were already struggling with, the boat engine I hadn't fixed yet, the last payment overdue on Lily's school trip. She didn't cry, she just held my hand. "So what do we do now?" she asked. I looked at her, then at Lily, asleep on the couch in her little rain boots, dreaming of nothing as cruel as this, and I said the only thing I could. We fight back, but not with anger, with truth, with everything we've got. Because Karen thought she could tear us down with cameras, but she didn't know we weren't just fishermen. We were families, and families don't break, they anchor. The town of Fells Point had never seen a media circus until Karen dragged it in with her ring light and rhetoric. The next morning, 3 different news vans lined the street near the pier, setting up cameras like they were covering a crime scene. Reporters huddled in front of the boats, tossing around terms like eco-violations and dock gate. My name came up again. Tyler Briggs, the local ringleader of outdated and damaging fishing practices. That was how they described me. Like I was orchestrating some environmental conspiracy instead of hauling striped bass to pay the electric bill. I didn't speak to the press. I didn't need to. I had a different plan, one that Karen couldn't edit, misquote, or twist. That same day, I asked Marla to come back with her camera. "We're telling everything this time," I told her. "Not just the work, the soul of it." She nodded and got to work, filming us from sunrise, when the mist still clung to the water, to sundown when our hands were blistered and raw. We showed how we measured every fish, followed conservation law to the letter, and took only what the bay could give. We interviewed the retired fisherman who now teaches kids about ocean health. We interviewed the single mom who ran the bait shack, the vet with PTSD who found peace on the water, and yes, even Jimmy, who finally agreed to speak. He sat on the dock, legs swinging, and stared directly into the lens. "I'm 17," he said. "I'm not a villain. I'm not a symbol. I'm a kid who loves the sea because it reminds me of my dad." You could have heard a pin drop on the dock. His words weren't rehearsed. They were real, and they pierced through all of Karen's curated outrage like a harpoon through fog. Marla cut the footage into a short doc called The Other Side of the Dock. When it went up, it wasn't just our town that watched. It was everyone, millions. The video trend tagged overnight. Hashtags like fishermen speak and dockside truth started trending. The shift was almost immediate. Suddenly, people weren't just reposting Karen's video, they were asking questions. Real ones. Where was her evidence? Had she ever spent a full day on a working boat? Why did she cut footage out of context? Even some of her own followers turned on her. "This isn't activism, it's harassment," one comment read. That night, Karen posted another video. Less fiery, more controlled. She didn't apologize. She doubled down. "I won't be silenced," she said. "Even if the fishermen spin their sad little stories, that was her mistake." Because by then, it wasn't just our story, it was America's. People in Maine, Alaska, Florida, other working-class fishers began posting their own stories too. Karen didn't just go after one dock. She lit a fire under a whole industry. And something happened that no one expected. A state inspector, the one who'd visited earlier, released a public statement. "There is no evidence of illegal activity at Fells Point," it read. "All permits are up to date. Environmental standards are being followed." That one post killed the last sliver of her narrative. It was like pulling a plug on a balloon full of noise. The air just left. Karen's followers shrank. Her comment sections turned into battlegrounds. And we kept fishing. But even though the worst had passed, the scars remained. Jimmy didn't come back to work right away. A few of the guys refused interviews now. "What's the point?" they said. "They'll twist it again." But not all of them. Some, like old Hank, who hadn't spoken on camera in 20 years, asked Marla if he could say a few words for her next doc. "Just in case another Karen tries it," he said with a wry smile. I started noticing new faces at the pier. Parents with kids, tourists asking to take pictures, teachers bringing students for real-life lessons. Something had changed. They didn't just see us as fishermen anymore. They saw us as storytellers, survivors, Americans. One evening, Hannah and I stood at the end of the dock, watching the sunset paint the water in streaks of gold and rust. Lily sat on my shoulders, humming some cartoon song. "You still think we need to fight back?" Hannah asked gently. I looked out at the boats, at Jimmy joking with Marla by the bait shop, at the peace slowly returning like the tide. "No," I said. "I think the truth did the fighting for us." But even as the water calmed, I knew Karen wasn't gone. Not really. People like her don't quit. They regroup. And something told me, in the back of my mind, she still had one more move, one last card she hadn't played, and whatever it was, I'd be ready. Because this time, I wasn't just defending my name, I was defending my legacy. 2 weeks passed with barely a whisper from Karen. No videos, no rants, no hashtags, just silence. It felt off, too quiet, like the eye of a storm pretending to be peace. Most of the town moved on, relieved. Orders picked back up. Jimmy returned to the docks, tentative at first, but soon back to laughing and cracking jokes while tying knots like a pro. Marla's documentary had just passed 5 million views, and a national magazine requested an interview with me. "Just be honest," Hannah said, adjusting the collar of my shirt the morning the reporter came. "Don't let them turn you into something you're not." I nodded, but part of me was already bracing for the twist I felt brewing. And sure enough, it came. Not through a video, not through a tweet, through a subpoena, delivered to the dock in a plain white envelope with a county seal stamped at the top. I opened it right in front of the guys. "What's that?" Jimmy asked. My hands tightened as I read the words. "Karen Ellison versus Tyler Briggs, civil harassment and defamation suit." "She's suing me," I muttered. The dock fell silent. "For what?" someone finally said. "For making her fall in the water. For saving her from drowning?" But I already knew. This wasn't about justice. It was about the one thing Karen had left: control. The lawsuit claimed I'd orchestrated a smear campaign against her that led to public humiliation, personal threats, and loss of sponsorships. She even claimed psychological distress. My client, her lawyer wrote, was portrayed as a reckless extremist when in fact she was conducting lawful protest under her First Amendment rights. I slammed the paper down on the bait table. She tried to slap fish out of my hands. I growled. That's not protest, that's assault. But it didn't matter. In the court of law, facts were just a starting point. The narrative still mattered, and I'd learned the hard way. Karen was a master of narrative. Hannah insisted I hire a lawyer. So I did. A local guy named Derek Hunt, soft-spoken but sharp as a hook. He combed through the video footage, collected witness statements, even pulled Karen's own live stream where she bragged about taking a swing at those murderers. She's banking on fear, Derek told me. She doesn't want a courtroom. She wants you to back down. But I couldn't back down. Not after everything. Not after she dragged my name, my family, my livelihood through the mud. And especially not after what she did next. A week before the first court hearing, Karen showed up in town, in person, wearing black from head to toe like she was attending a funeral. Mine, apparently. She brought with her a small crew of New Age activists holding signs that read "Fish, Field 2" and "Stop Dockside Slaughter." They camped near the pier chanting, shouting, filming everything. Her face was stone cold, lips tight, eyes fixed on me every time I passed. "We don't need violence to win," she told a news crew on day 2. "Just patience and the truth." But I saw through it. This was her final move, public pressure. If the court didn't break me, maybe the town would, maybe the noise, the shame, the disruption would wear me down. But Fells Point wasn't buying it, not anymore. On day 3 of her protest, something incredible happened. The town showed up, not for her, but against her. Local business owners stood beside the dock with hand-painted signs that read, "We stand with Tyler," and "Real work, real lives." The pastor, the school principal, even the diner waitress who'd once served Karen a free slice of pie all stood behind me. They weren't loud. They didn't chant. They just stood, quiet, firm, united. Karen's followers started leaving that afternoon, one by one, and by sunset, only she remained. Sitting on a cooler, red-faced, eyes darting toward her phone that buzzed with fading views and cold silence. When court day came, I showed up in the same boots I wore fishing. I didn't need a suit to tell the truth. I testified calmly, clearly. The video footage played for the judge. Karen flinched as it showed her lunge, her slip, the rescue. Her lawyer objected, the judge overruled. When it was all done, the room was still. The ruling came fast. Case dismissed. No merit. Court costs paid by the plaintiff. Karen didn't wait for the cameras. She stormed out before I could even stand. No final speech, no apology. Just the exit of someone who finally realized she wasn't the main character anymore. I walked out to find Hannah and Lily waiting. Jimmy, too, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You win?" he asked. I nodded. "Feels weird, though," Jimmy chuckled. "Feels like justice to me." But I knew this wasn't just my win. It belonged to every dockhand, every crabber, every single person whose story was nearly rewritten by someone with a camera and a cause. Karen came with outrage. We answered with the truth. And in the end, it was the truth that stayed anchored. With the lawsuit dismissed and Karen gone, it felt like a fog had finally lifted over Fells Point. There was no celebration, no cheering crowds, just a deep, shared exhale. We returned to what we knew best: fishing, fixing nets, and feeding families. Jimmy showed up every morning, without fail now, cracking his old jokes and humming off-key country songs. Even Hank, who had sworn off talking to cameras forever, kept asking if Marla had another one of those stories she needed help filming. But underneath the laughter and boat engines, I felt something still unsettled in me, like I was waiting for the ripple before the next wave. It came not from Karen, but from the outside world. A journalist from a major coastal magazine emailed Marla. He'd watched the documentary and wanted to write a national piece, The Human Side of Dock Life. At first, I wasn't sure. The last time someone told my story, it nearly cost me everything. But Hannah looked at me with that quiet encouragement she always had. "Maybe it's time you told it on your own terms," she said. So I did. I told the reporter about my dad, about losing him to a storm when I was just 16, about the pressure of keeping a legacy alive, about Jimmy and what Karen's lies almost did to him. I didn't ask for sympathy. I just wanted the truth to float again. When the article came out, it was raw and honest. The pictures showed our calloused hands, our tired eyes, our little dock with its worn wood and rusted hinges. But it also showed pride, grit, purpose. Comments poured in, some thanking us for our work, others apologizing for believing Karen's narrative. I won't lie, it felt good, but it didn't erase everything. Not the tension, not the fear that the next crusader with the camera might come marching down the dock again, but it gave us a weapon we hadn't had before: understanding. Then, almost as if scripted by fate, Karen posted again. Not a video, not a protest, an apology. It was short, just a note on a pale Instagram background. "I went too far. I'm still learning," she wrote. "To those I hurt, especially Tyler Briggs and the people of Fells Point, I'm sorry." The comments were split. Some hailed her for humility. Others accused her of backpedaling for clout. I didn't comment. I didn't share it. But I read it. Twice. And though I couldn't forget what she did, a small part of me respected what she was trying to do now. Still, the town didn't forget, and neither did I. A week later, I walked down to the pier just before sunrise. The sky bled orange across the water, and the scent of salt and motor oil mixed in the air like home. Jimmy was already prepping the boat. "You good?" he asked, handing me a thermos. I nodded. Better than I've been in a long time, because something had shifted in me. Not just relief, but something sturdier. Resolve. The world wouldn't stop spinning just because one storm passed, but we had something stronger than outrage. We had roots. We had community. We had truth. And Karen? She wasn't the end of the story. She was just the storm that reminded us why we fight to stay afloat. That spring, Fells Point felt reborn. It wasn't loud, it wasn't flashy, it was in the little things. Orders picked up, more tourists came down to the pier not to gawk but to listen. Marla kept filming, this time capturing the rhythm of the town. Hank teaching a kid how to mend a net. Jimmy sketching boat designs on a napkin. Me showing Lily how to tie a dock line without losing a finger. For the first time in years, we weren't just seen, we were understood. But that's the funny thing about healing. Sometimes it reveals wounds you didn't know you had. One Saturday, a woman approached me on the dock while I was rinsing the deck. She wore thick glasses, jeans, and a long sweater. Not a protester, not a press. "You're Tyler, right?" she asked. I nodded, cautious. "I used to follow Karen," she said, her voice soft. "I even donated to her fund." She paused, then smiled with a strange mix of shame and hope. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was supporting." I looked at her for a long second before answering. "You believed in something," I said. "That's not a crime. But you're here now. That counts." She exhaled and asked if she could buy some fish. It was the first time I sold striped bass to someone who'd once called me a killer in a comment section. It happened more than once. Quiet apologies. Former critics showing up with curious questions and cautious hearts. The world was shifting in a way I never expected. More honest, more humble. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Still, not everyone was ready to forgive. Hank wouldn't let anyone with a camera near his boat. Jimmy refused to open his DMs. "She ruined too much," he told me. "I know she said sorry, but some scars don't fade just because someone changes their mind." I respected that. We all process pain differently. Then came an offer that stunned us all. A representative from a national fishing conservation group reached out. They'd seen our story, read the articles, and wanted to partner. "We want to showcase ethical, small-scale fishing communities," the rep said. "You all could be a model." For a moment, I couldn't even respond. After everything Karen accused us of being cruel, careless, destructive, here we were being invited to represent sustainability. I felt like poetic justice, but not the gloating kind, the quiet kind, the kind that plants roots instead of burning bridges. The deal included training programs, upgraded gear, and a pledge that put us on record as conservation conscious. Some old-timers bristled. "We've been doing it right for decades," one muttered. "Why do we need a certificate to prove we're decent?" I understood, but I also saw the bigger picture. Because the next Karen might not fall in the water, I told him. She might be better prepared, smarter, meaner. And we need to be ready with facts, footage, and proof. Signing that agreement felt like anchoring ourselves in something stronger than pride. Purpose. We weren't just fighting for our names anymore. We were preserving a legacy for our kids, for our waters, for the truth. And then out of the blue, I got a letter. From Karen, not digital, not performative, handwritten. The envelope was creased and the ink slightly smudged like it had been folded and unfolded 100 times before being sent. The letter was different. There was no spin, no defense, just raw words. She said she was in therapy, that she'd been offline, that she wasn't proud of what she became during that time. I thought activism meant being loud, she wrote, but maybe real change comes from listening. I'm sorry I'd never listened to you, to any of you. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. I folded the letter and placed it in my journal, the one Hannah gave me after our first court hearing. I didn't forgive her that day. I didn't forget what she cost us. But I finally felt the weight of it all start to shift. Not disappear, just redistribute. Like a tide pulling out to sea, leaving a new shoreline behind. Fells Point was still small, still simple, but it had changed. So had we. And deep down, I knew the story wasn't over. Not yet. Summer rolled in heavy, the kind that made the sea shimmer and the air hang thick with salt. Fells Point bustled like it hadn't in years. Kids ran barefoot on the docks. Couples took selfies with the boats behind them. There was laughter again. Pure, unfiltered, belly-deep laughter. And in the middle of it all stood our crew, sunburnt and steady, hauling up nets like clockwork. But even in this new warmth, I kept one eye on the horizon. Not out of fear, but awareness. Because once you've weathered a storm like Karen, you don't forget the shape of the clouds. The conservation partnership changed everything. We got new gear, safer, cleaner, easier on the ocean floor. Marla filmed the install and turned it into a segment called Modern Hands, Ancient Waters. It went viral within days. People started seeing fishermen not as relics of the past, but as protectors of it. And then the offers came. Speaking gigs, podcast invites, even a Netflix inquiry about a miniseries. I turned most of them down. I wasn't chasing fame, I was chasing peace. But I agreed to one invitation, a panel in Baltimore about sustainable fishing. Jimmy came with me, nervous as hell. But I watched his shoulders straighten as he answered questions from scientists and activists like he belonged there. And he did. We all did. Back in town, something even more surprising was taking shape. Karen's old followers had split into two camps. Some stayed angry, still bitter, still clinging to her old rhetoric. But a new group, smaller, quieter, started messaging Marla, asking to visit Fells Point. We want to see it for ourselves, one wrote. We want to learn, not accuse. So we let them come. Not as tourists, as students. We walked them through our process, showed them our permits, let them feel the calluses on our hands. One girl cried when she realized how different reality was from what she'd seen online. She hugged Jimmy and said, I thought I knew everything. Turns out I didn't know a thing. Still, the change wasn't without friction. Some folks in town didn't want them there. Don't trust those flip-floppers, one man barked. They'll turn on you again. Maybe he was right. But Hannah said something that stuck with me. If we only open the door for those who already agree with us, we never grow. So we kept that door open, and slowly, the bridge Karen burned was being rebuilt, plank by plank, word by word. One evening while closing up shop, I noticed an unfamiliar face standing near the edge of the dock. A young woman, mid-20s, holding a notepad. I walked over. You lost? I asked. She smiled. No, just watching. My dad was a fisherman in Oregon. He died a few years back. I never got to ask him the things I wanted to. Watching you all, it helps. Thank you. I stood there for a moment, stunned. And then I did something I hadn't done for a stranger in years. I invited her to ride out with us the next morning. Not as press, just as someone who understood. That next day, we hit the water before sunrise. The sky bled pale pink as our boat cut through the calm. The woman, her name was Nora, stood near the edge, silent. At one point, she asked if she could cast a line. Jimmy showed her how. When she reeled in her first catch, her eyes filled with tears. He would have loved this, she whispered. I nodded. He probably still does. It was a quiet moment. Simple, but it reminded me that what we do out here, on this water, with these hands, it matters. Not just for profit, not just for survival, for connection, for memory, for truth. And Karen, I hadn't heard from her since the letter. Rumors swirled that she'd moved out west, gone back to school. Some said she was volunteering at a marine sanctuary. I didn't know if any of it was true. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't need to know because she wasn't the point anymore. We were our town, our people, our story, anchored in something deeper than outrage, rooted in something louder than a viral clip, bound by the sea and by each other. It was just past 4:30 a.m. when the wind started speaking in a voice we hadn't heard in years, not the gentle breeze that whispered through the ropes, but a sharp, low groan that made the boat sway and the gulls scatter before sunrise. I stood at the edge of the dock, coffee in one hand, weather radio in the other. Coastal storm warning, it buzzed. Expected surge levels rising overnight. All small craft operations advised to secure by dusk. I didn't flinch. I had heard warnings like that before, but the way the air shifted in my lungs, it felt personal, like the sea was reminding us, gently but firmly, you're still at my mercy. By noon, the clouds had thickened, gray and heavy like wet wool. Jimmy helped me double knot the dock lines while Hank worked silently, his jaw set the way it always was before a storm. How bad you think it'll hit? Jimmy asked. Hard enough to remind us, I said. He nodded, understanding without needing more. We'd been through worse, hurricanes, flooding, salt rot. But this time, with the media attention and partnerships, we had more to lose. Not just our boats, but the momentum. The trust we'd fought for. As the wind picked up, townsfolk came to help. Kids carried sandbags, teachers taped windows. Even Marla paused her editing to grab a shovel. There was no panic, just movement. That's how we survived. Together and always in motion. By sundown, the sky had turned black. Not navy, not blue. Black! Like ink poured from the heavens. The water rose fast. Waves slapped at the pier, angry and insistent. I stood watch from the shop window with Hannah and Lily, the storm reflected in both of their wide eyes. Jimmy had insisted on staying at the dock, said he'd feel better sleeping in the boat. I knew better than to argue. Some lessons the sea has to teach itself. The storm hit full force just after midnight. Roofs rattled. The bait shack's tin sign tore loose and clanged like a bell from hell. I didn't sleep. By morning, it was over, and Fells Point was still standing. Damaged, yes, bruised and soaked, but standing. The pier had taken the worst of it. One of the newer boats had cracked its moorings and slammed into the pylons, snapping them like pencils. Our boat, the Mary Elise, had held, barely. Jimmy was soaked to the bone and grinning like a lunatic when we found him. She held, he laughed, pounding the side of the hull, like she knew she had something to prove. The storm didn't take our spirit. In fact, it did something strange. It brought more people in. Volunteers came from neighboring towns. Former critics turned into unexpected allies. A local vegan restaurant, yes, vegan, donated hot meals to the cleanup crews. When the owner handed me a bowl of lentil stew, she said, I still don't eat fish, but I get you now. It meant more than she could have known. In the days that followed, we rebuilt the dock, the bait shop, the small things that made our lives whole, but we also built something else. A community kitchen right by the waterfront. A place where stories could be shared over food, where visitors could ask questions, and where fishermen could be human first, not characters in someone's social war. And in the mail, another surprise, a package with no return address. Inside, a book, The Language of Water, annotated with sticky notes. Note, just a dog-eared page circled in pen. The sea does not belong to one side. It is neither villain nor savior. It reflects the truth of those who face it. Erin's handwriting. I closed the book and said nothing. Just placed it on the shelf beside the journal where I kept her letter. Because her voice was no longer a threat. It had become part of the tide. Echoing, fading, and finally quiet. We were the ones still here, listening, hauling, teaching. And as Jimmy said, as we fixed the pylon with new rope in weathered hands, she thought she'd drown us, but she just taught us to swim stronger. By the time fall settled in, Fells Point looked different, weathered, sure, but wiser. The storm had carved new lines into the dock, pulled at the bones of the boats, and tossed some things we thought secure. But what remained was stronger. The new community kitchen buzzed every weekend, not just with hungry mouths, but curious minds. College students, food bloggers, even a few quiet Karen sympathizers who no longer came with signs but with notebooks and open ears. That Saturday morning, the water was calm, so still it looked like glass. I sat on a bench outside the kitchen with Jimmy, sipping coffee as the sun broke through the mist. Marlo was setting up to film again, but this time it wasn't about protests or storms. It was about what came after: healing, harmony, and hard-earned peace. She called it Salt in Our Veins, Life After the Storm. I liked the title. It sounded like us. As she adjusted her camera, a voice behind us said, "Mind if I sit?" We both turned and froze. Karen, hair tied back, no camera crew, no entourage, just a quiet look in her eyes that hadn't been there before. Jimmy stiffened. I stood, unsure. "I'm not here to film or talk," she said quickly. "Just to see. For myself. The place I misunderstood." There was a long pause. You could feel the weight of what she was asking. Not forgiveness, maybe, but grace. Jimmy looked at me. I looked at the horizon, and then I said, "You sit. You listen. You don't preach. That's the deal." She nodded. No argument. Just a quiet, grateful breath. She took the bench across from us and watched as kids helped carry crates of fresh-caught snapper into the kitchen. No snide remarks, no lectures, just observation. After about 20 minutes, she stood to leave, but before she turned away, she said, "It's different than I imagined. You're different." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to, because everything she needed to know was in the air. In the scent of salt and smoked fish, the hammering of repairs, the laughter from the dock, and the warmth inside the community we built. None of that needed explanation. It just was. At night, as the stars came out, Jimmy and I took the Mary Elise out for a late run, just a quick check on traps we'd set earlier in the week. The boat moved smooth through the black water, carving silence as it went. "I think she really got it this time," Jimmy said. "Maybe," I replied, "but maybe she'll go back and forget again." He turned to me. "Does it matter?" I thought about it, and then I smiled. "Not anymore." Because the lesson wasn't for her. It was for us. That truth doesn't bend under pressure. That hard work can't be canceled. That a legacy built on honesty and grit doesn't crumble under digital outrage. When we returned to shore, Lily was asleep in Hannah's arms, curled up in a blanket that smelled like sea and home. I kissed them both, then looked out one last time at the water, gleaming under the moonlight. We weren't just fishermen anymore. We were storytellers, bridge builders, guardians of a truth too old and deep to be shaken by waves, because now the world knew our story, and we would keep telling it, one tide at a time. Subscribe for more real stories that go deeper than the drama. Because sometimes the strongest voices are the quiet ones, the ones still working, still healing, still here.